that I was going to be Mike tonight. He says, and Rebecca could vouch for that. He says, and I'm not sure if that's a good idea, Mom. You have a tendency to be unfiltered. And I thought, wow, he didn't even say thank you. And, congratulations, they asked you, Good evening, ladies. And thank you all for coming tonight and taking your time out to hear me speak. This is such an honor for me. When Cassandra asked me, probably about a few weeks ago, if I would be interested, she sent me an email and she said, would you be interested being, the host of the Titus too? And I didn't hesitate at all. I said I would be honored to be here tonight. And I just felt very humble that I was even asked, because the fact is there are so many lovely ladies that go to our church that I could pick in a minute that could be up here tonight. And so I was very humble and honored. So thank you all for coming out tonight and hearing me speak. I've had a really interesting life, as you can see, and a really wonderful life. Not an easy life, no, not at all. And you could see that I haven't had an easy life. My father and mother were two wonderful people, and I was blessed to be in a family that gave me the confidence, determination to be who I am today, with the obstacles and challenges that I have to face. And that never bothered me. I just went in, I went on and became who I wanted to be. And you know what? Size was not an issue. My father grew up in the 20s from Burwell, Nebraska, at a farm town with 6 boys. He grew up in a very poor town, a very poor family. And so he's actually had, enlisted in the Marines at age 14, just to get out, and because of his father died at age 13, when my father was 13 years old. So he enlisted in the Marines, and he went out in World War II, and he was in Iwo Jima, and he saw the flag that was put up, our American flag. So you can imagine the stories that, he didn't say too much, but what he went through. My mother also grew up in a farm town in several states away. She grew up in Minnesota, and it's a little town called Chicago, Minnesota, with 2 siblings, a brother and a sister, and she was the middle child. She grew up in a Catholic family, but her mother was Methodist. And in that small town, you can imagine being a dad a Catholic and a mother a Methodist. Well, that didn't go well, No, especially when church is the whole key and entertainment in a small town. My dad grew up as a Catholic. My grandma was very Catholic. So it was great. My mom grew up actually the top of her class, so she too had to graduate early, and she went off to Montana. Well, when my dad came back from the Marines and worked, my dad did, did many jobs. He went to Montana. Well, guess what? That's where they met, in Montana. And they ended up getting married, and then my oldest sister, there is 5 siblings in my family. Whew. Boy, I couldn't get any lower than me. There's 5 siblings in my family. I am the 4th child. And yes, I am the little person in the family. Everybody else is average size. My oldest sister was born in Kansas, and my parents happened to have her in Kansas, and they lived there for a little bit. And you'll find my family story is quite fascinating. And they lived there for a little bit, and then 5 years later, had another daughter named Jody. And she was born where my dad's state was, Nebraska. So they moved back to Nebraska. And so had Jody, and a year later, they ended up in Wyoming and had my brother. So that's 3, go figure. And so had my brother, and then, of course, they ended up 4 years later and had me. I was born back to my mom's state now, in Minnesota on Lake Vermilion. Now, mind you, my dad had several types of jobs. I think my dad, pretty much being a poor boy, wanted to try everything. And believe me, you guys, he did. He tried everything. So I was born on Lake Vermilion, and that is north of Minnesota, not where my mom lived. My mom was more in the Alexander area, a little down and east. Well, anyway, I was born in Lake Vermilion, and they ended up buying a resort. So, yeah, go figure. A resort, and they had that for a couple of years, okay? So then I was born in a little town called Cook, Minnesota. And when I was born, it was interesting because my mom's in them days, because I was born in 1961, and September 61. September 11th. And in those days, they didn't have ultrasound, so they didn't know what, you're going to have or whatever. And the little Asian doctor says, when I came out, this is going to be a little late person. Well, of course, my mom and dad were joyed, however, whatever type of baby they were going to have. Well, after I was born and after a year on the resort, they went back to Montana. They went to Billings, Montana, and had my sister, who is 3 years younger than I am. They went to Billings, Montana, and had my sister, Holly. And my dad got in the car business, and he was in the car business for several years. And his car business at that time was Sorensen Rambler. And so he was a strong politician. He loved politics, and he loved trying different businesses, which my dad pretty much did a lot of things. As years went by, we said to them, "What were you guys, gypsies?" I mean, my God, we were all born, all 5 of us kids, in different states. So what a story. So anyway, Montana has been our home for, since now. And Billings, Montana, they lived there for a year, and then they moved to Great Falls, Montana. My dad ended up the car business in Sorensen Rambler, and then he went into internationals, and then he ended up going into the motorhome business and did very well. In the meantime, before the motorhome business, my dad got into politics. Yes, my dad was a politician. He ended up being senator in Montana, in Great Falls, Montana. So it was an interesting ride because I was only in 5th grade at the time. And you can imagine a 5th grader when other parents, my dad was a strong Democrat. And when other parents might not, vote for your dad, you just feel like you want to fit in with your peers. And that's the last thing you want is a parent to be, being in the front line and, be talked about, I mean, it's just not what you wanted. But my older sisters did end up, going out and helping him out and everything. What was interesting is he did do one term of politician. My mom had a very difficult time, being a politician's wife. It was really difficult. Now, if my dad would have ran, we'd be all out there. We'd be running, we'd be all excited. I'd be so proud of him. But here's a picture I had. If you girls want to. This was taken probably, ladies, about 40 years ago. Oh, wow. I know. I showed it on my Facebook page, and they go, what? So anyway, he was a politician and ran a business. Well, he served one term. Well, it was quite difficult running a business and being away. And so he had other guys, and as you know, owning a business, it's hard to have somebody else take over. And having 5 kids to raise. We grew up in Great Falls, Montana, and we had quite a nice big home. My dad spoiled us rotten. And I think having not had anything, growing up, he wanted to give us the best. And believe me, we probably had way more than what we should have, what we needed. He had, like I said, a car lot when we were younger, and then he went into motorhomes. But the cars, my sister would take probably the best to the prom, the Javelins, and, I can't remember, it's been so long ago. And, many cars. And the thing is, they were just great parents. Growing up in Great Falls, Montana, it was a town of 60,000 people, and you know what? They were awesome. With my family was extremely, the children, the siblings were pretty outgoing. A couple of them got college degrees, as far as, they all have college degrees, but full ride scholarships for sports. And so they did well, and now the second and third generation are now doing it too, the sports. Matter of fact, I had some cousins that went to the Olympics last year. So if you follow my page, I might post them and they go, what? You got, Olympic cousins? But growing up was great. And, I was so blessed to grow up in a town that a beautiful family, but that fit in, and I never, my obstacles and challenges was never an issue, you guys. And I think the fact that my parents, being as outgoing, especially my dad, made us feel, and we got that feel from him, that we all ended up pretty much being today entrepreneurs and trying different things. When we were growing up, we all thought, oh my God, he's crazy. He's going to do what? He's going to do this. But you know what? You learn every time, you go through something. And we did. We learned the politics. We learned him having a business. We learned, well, I don't know about him having children in 5 states, but we learned, we learned so much from them. And, I think that's what is so neat about families. And if you have a warm, loving family, that's what makes you today who you are. And so what was interesting, I graduated from CMR, which was my high school, and my goal for so many years is come to Hollywood. And my parents go, yeah, she's okay, she wants to go to Hollywood. Yeah, she'll never do it. Senior year comes rolling on. My friends are all going to Ivy League schools, and I said, Mom, Dad, I'm going to Hollywood. You gotta be flippin'. I didn't know a lot of little people. It wasn't like I was going for the little people, or I didn't know. I was probably pretty much at that time the only little person in my town. So my dream was, when watching television, is I want to go to Hollywood. And I always sang, and I enjoyed the entertainment. I knew a lot about it. Well, anyway, I ended up telling them that, and I came out here, you guys. I came out here to visit a friend. In those days, I guess you could, who was staying with her uncle and ended up 2 doors down being a nanny for a family that was looking for a nanny. Now, go figure. Now, who would let their daughter in today's world probably go out? I know I wouldn't, But in them days, you did that. And that is something that my dad did. That is something as far as going out and, and striving for what you want. So I ended up being a nanny. And then what happened was I started auditioning, and then got something, what was it? A commercial. And then after that, I ended up finding friends and getting an apartment in Van Nuys, and pretty much started going, getting in the business. And I thought, boy, how lucky is that? One of my first big breaks was before I got married, was Captain EO with Michael Jackson. Could you imagine getting something at the age of 22? And probably at that time, I'm going to have to get some water. At that time, it was the Avatar of the 80s. So there was only a couple of my friends that were auditioning, and I ended up getting it. And so the Captain EO was at 3D at Disneyland, which was like the Avatar of the 80s, where it was Michael Jackson was the main guy who they wanted with the music, and then George Lucas produced it, and Francis Ford Coppola directed it. Now, at 22 years old, I just landed what every actor's dream would want, and I thought, wow, this is just amazing. If my career goes like this, I am going to be living in Beverly Hills. Well, of course, that's what you think at 22 is like, man, I'm flying high. Where is my ignorance, please? So anyway, or the ego at the time. But anyway, I ended up, so we worked there at Laura Mars Studios, and it was probably a 6-month shoot. And yes, I got to know Michael. As a matter of fact, I posted that on Facebook as well a couple of years ago. And I got to know Francis, and I got to know George Lucas. And we would get actors that would come in, big-time actors that would just visit. So after that, it was, Captain EO, I ended up doing more, getting other auditions and working. And then went to a basketball game. And mind you, I wasn't around even, I knew there was quite a few little people living here in LA, and I didn't even know that at the time. But now I do. I know a lot of them. But I went to a basketball game, ended up meeting my husband. And I had already been out here for about 3 years before I met Joe. Joe, my husband, was on a professional basketball team, and we started chatting, and we started, of course, dating, and he comes from an Italian family. So you can imagine, I had kind of a low-key, my dad, you couldn't get any quieter than my dad. And my mom, as much as my dad was business-wise outgoing, he was low-key, and it wasn't any grandma. Yeah, you couldn't get any quieter. I get into a wonderful but Italian family. And my father and mother-in-law were wonderful. They were absolutely wonderful. And, of course, the relatives were so, they're so Italian. They were wonderful, too. So we got married in 1986, and it was great. It was great. So I've been married, you guys, almost 30 years to the same guy. After we got married, Joe and Joe got in the business. Joe was an electronic technician and worked for a place called Admaster and in Monrovia. And at that time, we moved over by the in-laws. So we were east and over by Monrovia, Monterey Park area. And we both were in the business, and we both were competing. So you can imagine, you come home and think your husband or your mate is in a different line of work, but I don't think so, guys. We're competing for the same job. So you can imagine, because a lot of times our jobs is like costume character or something you wouldn't see a female, you're not going to see me in person, but yet those were our moneymaker jobs. Joe and I ended up getting work, and we were fortunate, to be able to work, and fortunate, to have some money saved aside. And we came back to Burbank. We had friends in Burbank and bought the house down the street. Well, we've lived there 29 years, and mind you, I didn't do anything like my folks did. They moved around, and I'm still at that house. And Joe's parents was in their house for about 60 years, too. We ended up buying the house down here, and then still working. And Joe was at that time, because he was a bodybuilder and he did stunts in the movies, and TV shows. He was competing, which you know, for the Paralympics. So we got to go to Barcelona, Spain, and he qualified for the Paralympics. So the Paralympics are a week before the regular Olympics. So we went to Barcelona, Spain, and boy, that was experience itself. And he qualified for the weightlifting competition. When we got back, I was pregnant. And I was pregnant the first time. And I was told I was going to have a little girl who was going to be little. Coming up to a week before, little ladies cannot have their babies natural. They have to have C-section because we are so small in the pelvic. So years ago, probably, I think it was Billy Barty's wife, almost died on the operating table when she had Lori. And they said, for medical history, I don't ever want to see, put it on the records, I never want to see a little lady have it natural because the way we're built. Mind you, there are 200 types of dwarfism. So to educate, that could be another night itself with the genetics, let me tell you. But just to educate you all, I'm the achondroplasia dwarf, which is the most common type of dwarfism, and that is the longer torso and short limbs. My husband is too. There is 200 different types. So you guys, I'm sure, have seen the pituitaries. A little person is usually, so you're off the hook, Becky. A little person's usually under 4'8". So that's considered, in medical terms, a little person. So my first baby was 50% that it was going to be little, the fact that Joe and I are little, And so I was pregnant with her, and a week before, I went into labor. And when the doctor had said to us, I think she's just in pre-labor. And I was not well. I knew something was up, something was wrong. And, I always listen to the mother's intuition. There's something about, then a doctor. The doctor kept saying, no, I think you're just in, labor. She's fine. Give her, reduce by giving her pills. Ended up, ladies, the baby had passed away already. And so when it came upon time of having it, we didn't know before. They had told me when we went in there and when they were going to deliver it. And that was pretty difficult. And as you can imagine, there's so many women in my, that have lost children. Fran has lost, my sister Holly, there's so many. And at that time, you think you're the only one. You think, and my husband and I thought, because we already had the baby's room and everything, and to lose it at birth, which it had already passed away. I think it, already had passed. She was going to be little. And we were in the waiting room, in the waiting room, and the nurses and doctors were so sad. I mean, you could tell, and I was like trying to pep everybody up and thinking, it's life. It's life. Well, my faith helped me that, because I didn't mention, my parents never practiced faith with us. I'm kind of an interesting story. The fact is that I had faith at a really early age, and maybe because who I am, and I prayed a lot. Prayed, every night. And my sister and I prayed. I went to Bible school. With neighbors that did go to church. And I think the fact that they moved around a lot, they just kind of never, got in. The fact is that both of their parents were they went to church. Their parents did, but they never did. But I always, at an early age, had faith. And like I said, with hard times, which we all endure in our lives, young until we get old, I always prayed, and that got me through. And so when I lost the baby, I prayed. I prayed, and it did get us through. It is life, and it's it's sad, but it does happen. Year later, I was pregnant again. We were at the same church, St. Joseph's, and it happened to be that the same RN was working that night that I lost a year ago. And of course, I had the same doctor, because we have to have kind of special doctors, being the way we're built and everything. I had the same nurse, the RN, and somehow everybody that was there the year before happened to be there that night. And some of them even said, could I work a double shift, because they saw my name. I had Garrett. And he was actually the biggest baby that morning that, I ended up having that morning. And what was funny is the nurses were telling me when they were saying, this little guy's the biggest, this morning. You should see the mother. And it was great. Yeah, it was great, because I happened to, at the time when I was working with Garrett, working on a show called Evening Shade with Burt Reynolds, Mary Lou Henner. And I was, when you work on shows and get to know people, you kind of get spoiled. And, and they just, of course, they have the money, and they just, throw these lavish flowers. Well, it was so funny, because my whole room, you couldn't even walk in. The whole production sent me flowers. Well, I tell this story all the time. Grandma, remember? Burt Reynolds at the time was so excited. He sent me a bouquet, ladies. You couldn't even put it in my room. It was about the size of that table. Wow. at St. Joseph, they said, we've never seen a bouquet that big. Well, of course, Burt Reynolds, sends it. But it was such a joyous occasion for me. And, of course, I prayed. I thought, boy, God, thank you. And he came out to be a healthy boy, and we've enjoyed them. Grandma was right in the picture because Frances lives right next door. So she's kind of like an adopted grandma to Garrett. And, of course, Garrett considers her one of his grandmas. And we were blessed to have her at the time and still are. But, yes, we had Garrett, and then I ended up going to work. I land things. Mind you, ladies, I didn't have to work all the time. When you work, you might do a commercial or something, then you're off. Or, if you land something, it's not very long. It doesn't last long. So I was able to be in my son's life. I was able, and I felt very blessed that I could do that financially and everything. I was able to get involved and be in the PTA. And, of course, I had, I was vice president of Bret Hart, and I was involved in Luther, and I actually had some fundraisers that I put on, one at the Sports and Lodge, and another that my husband was involved. He had a professional basketball team. I don't know if any of you guys have seen, called the Breakers at the time, but years ago, before that, probably 20 years before that, he was with the Hollywood Shorties, and they did play village school. And so I have to laugh because I'm forever, I remember you at village school, at church. And he played. So what was nice is that the proceeds to the game itself went towards the school. So we were able, that was a fundraiser. So he played all over LA for a long time. And it was like 50-50 where, the school makes some and the players make it. So we did a lot of games in Burbank, when Garrett was little. And he was also the coach of Garrett's baseball and basketball. And it's been a great community. We were fortunate to be in the entertainment world and be able to come home and have a normal life. And we chose that. I was not your typical entertainer type of person to go out. Matter of fact, auditions and some of the things that they asked me to be, it was uncomfortable for me, but I was blessed to be able to, have the chance to do it, but it was uncomfortable. And my main purpose, was to come home after work and be a mom. And be a mom and get my child involved in, activities. And plus, we started, when Garrett was little, coming here. And mind you, I tried, I tested out a lot of churches in Burbank. And you try, I tried the Catholic churches, I tried, you want to find your own niche, started coming here, and then I think shortly Grandma came too, and I really, really liked it. And Garrett was in some of the programs and through the years, and also too did some Bible school, didn't he? A Bible camp once too. So it just somehow everything comes full circle in life. And we've been in Burbank a long time, and like I said, we've been blessed. Mind you, my life hasn't been easy, but what I do tell people is if you have the faith and the courage and the determination, it doesn't matter who you are, you can get it. You can succeed. And I tell kids over and over all the time that it doesn't matter who you are. Is if you got the drive, you can be anybody you want to be. And like I said, I will say it over again, I've had an amazing life. I've had a challenging life. But I was able to succeed my goals. And now, I am so blessed. And 2 years ago, when I got out of the business, I came here. 2 years ago when I got out of the business, I've always been a cake decorator and always enjoyed baking. And everybody said, you know what, you should get on Facebook. And I thought, oh, no, I'm not good enough to be on Facebook. Oh, no. And I worked with a custom cake decorator because I kind of wanted at that time, probably about 15 years ago, I was ready to get out because being a female in the entertainment business, You know how that goes. And I didn't want to do the same, stuff. I was ready to move on. And so I had started baking and everything, and then what happened was my sister said, you should get on Facebook, and I didn't think I was good enough, so what I did is I worked with the custom cake decorator, and then I did get on Facebook. And I was able, and it's been exciting, and I was able to show my stuff, and I was just amazed that the followers that I get. Now, I wouldn't be where I'm at today if I didn't work with the custom cake decorator, and also for like my sister that lives in Encino, that her child goes to probably the best private school, one of the most top private schools in LA. And, for all the people that, have businesses that have helped me out, and it does. It takes a village to start. And there you go. I'm blessed that I'm able to do now, again, another profession with the courage, strength, and faith in God that to guide me through what I want to do in my life. And like I said, if I'm any inspiration as far as being able to be who you want, I'm very happy that I'm able to help you, as far as that. It's been an interesting ride. And it's not been an easy ride, but it's been an interesting ride. And I couldn't ask for a better life. I really couldn't. And people have asked me that. People said, if you had to change, from what you know now, would you change? No. I have a nice family, beautiful friends, and a support team, and my siblings all do well. My siblings, my sister Holly is a TV producer. She graduated from after high school, she went to Dartmouth and graduated from Dartmouth and ended up out here, a TV producer. My sister Susie, oldest, she's a professional painter, plus had her own company. So you could see my brother worked for a business, and my sister Jody, who passed a couple of years ago with autoimmune diseases, was in the stock market. So we're all pretty driven in our own way, and we, like I said, we thank my parents for that. And, it's, like I said, it's been wonderful. And I so appreciate you guys tonight coming out and listening to me speak. And I really do. I appreciate that. And if you guys have any questions, feel free. I would love to answer them. How old is he? Garrett just turned the other day 24. Yes. And who's Garrett's girlfriend? Gee. That, what was interesting about this is Garrett, you often when you get up here, you start speaking and then you forget what you really wanted to say. Garrett came home. I had ended up in the middle of my life, 10 years ago, having neck surgery. And I had two of them, you guys. I had one, my first surgery was 11 years ago, and then I had 3 years later another one. And what they did is they fused the vertebrae and put hardware in. And I was with a spine doctor, Dr. Kropp, who does a lot of us little people. And because we are so compact that it takes, of course, everybody's a specialty anymore, aren't they? All doctors. So I 4 years ago on my second surgery, I was just laying there, and Garrett came home with a group of people. Becky was one of them, and he met her. Mind you, Garrett went to public schools. I thought about Village Christian, both Joe and I. He went to a public school, and he went one night to a private party at Village Christian with one of the girls and met Becky. So that comes full circle, and came home, and they've been dating for over 6 years? Yeah. So most marriages don't last that long. So anyway, it's neat. Her and Crystal come from a lovely family, and like I said, it's been great. And like Fran and Harless have been a big part of our life, and Grandma loves, like I said, I can't thank you ladies enough for being there for her. And she just loves and she praises this church. Cheryl and Wade have been awesome. Like through my neck surgery, I get called, from Scott or Cheryl saying, do you need anything? That's amazing. That's amazing. That's a community. That's a loving church, and they care. And like I said, I couldn't thank them enough because I thought, wow, that's pretty neat. You know, I'm blessed to have friends and loving friends that support me, aren't I, Grandma? When I got on Facebook a couple years ago, because I am a private person, you would never know it. I kind of had to be because I'm still doing autographs. I still do, like just last week, I did 1,500 Star Trek, because I was in the TV show Star Trek, and the cards, and it was a special autograph that you can win the card, and so I did, I think 1,500 of them. So I tend to still go back to the manager, you know, once in a while that something brings me back to my old stomping grounds. When I started the Bite Size Chef, though, I was bombarded with producers and wanting a reality show. And I thought, oh, no. And this is before all the stuff now, you guys. I mean, because this is before all, you see the little people shows now and everything. And they said, no, you'd be great. You got the package. And I thought, no. So that's been interesting, to do. But what I do, what's nice about the positive side of Facebook, because I have to be on, is being able to set a platform for all the charities that I'm involved. And I am so fortunate now to use my cakes and that platform to be able to use the cakes and other people's charities and be involved and donate. I'm at the level that I am now. And that means the world to me, that you can help somebody else. And when I do put on when I do post stuff, like I said, it was very overwhelming for me. Yet it's pretty much my cakes. I do get tagged, but I am blessed to be able to use that platform for my charities. And one of my charities is Icing Smiles for the terminally ill kids, where they get a cake, and it's Icing Smiles. You could type that.com. And it's a wonderful organization, and they asked me if I can make cakes for them, and that's probably the neatest thing out of all my life. That would top my life. As far as even before the acting, before anything, to be able to help somebody else. But yeah, I've done a lot. I've done a lot, and I just, like I said, I feel blessed, and I thank you all tonight. I hope you got something out of it. I thank you all for being here tonight and listening to my story. And I appreciate so much for being here. Thank you.